All right, welcome. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. Because we have a nice small group, thank you for coming down front. And that means that you get unlimited questions tonight. So that's the upside. Yeah. In case we haven't met personally, my name's Jeff Holcomb. I'm the high school principal, and I want to welcome you. Ruth Sanderson is the assistant principal, and she's going to be walking us through this evening. Just a few bits of information about our new reporting system that you experienced for the first time yesterday. So how many got to see your child's reports? Did you guys all receive that email? Yes? All right, excellent. So Ruth's going to walk you through a few bits of information about that and the new ways that we're assessing and reporting. She has some, I think, a little bit of work for you to do. And at the end, we'll answer questions if you have any. So thanks for coming. And Ruth.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Well, welcome, everyone. The agenda for tonight, what I'm going to go over is just reminding us all what assessment is in the high school, the 5 facets, and looking at what working levels are, because that's what we put on the report cards now for all students in grades 9 to 11. How the working level statements that teachers are writing for each report period, how they work, and looking at some examples of those. And what are the purpose of the reports, again at Seoul Foreign School in the high school. Looking at some data of the working levels that our students are getting and doing some comparisons of those working levels to the actual IB and IGCSE scores that our students have achieved so that you can see how they match. Just a reminder of the report card dates for this year. And finally, there was some time at the end for questions, okay? So let's start with the 5 facets of assessment. This is something I've been sharing since we started reviewing assessment in the high school last year. And this is how we define assessment in the high school. It's all the materials and procedures used to collect, evaluate, interpret, feedback to learners, record, and report evidence of learning. So when we talk about assessment, it's not just tests. It's how the teacher plans assessments, how they tell the students how well they're doing, how they record it in our grade book, and how they report. So today's really about the reporting part of assessment. So we're using these working levels, which in the past we may have referred to those as grades or scores, but more accurately for us now we call them working levels, which is the grade on a report card showing the level that the teacher's judge is currently being achieved by a student based on official assessment data. Because now in the high school, if you've looked in the grade books, if you've logged on as a parent onto PowerSchool, you'll see that teachers are recording assessments in 3 main categories. Of learning, which are the official assessments that count for the working levels, and then as learning or for learning, which are all about the learning process. They don't count or they're not considered in the working levels that the teacher's using. They're just being used by the student, by the teacher during the process to inform learning and to make sure that the learning process is taking place. And we also can refer to those ones as formative assessments. Many schools use that terminology. And the official assessments are summative assessments. They're the end of unit, often assessments. So the mid-semester report cards that were emailed yesterday and last night, they contain working level to date information. They're not, those working levels are just giving you and the student information of how things are going right now. They're not stored on the transcript. It's the end of semester report working levels that will be stored on the students' transcripts. And so far, because we're early in the year, we've only done half a semester. Some classes have only completed 1 official assessment so far, things like art, where they're working on big projects that take a long time to produce. They've done smaller numbers of assessments, and some have done more than 3. So there's various amounts of data that our teachers are looking at in determining the working levels at this point. And so what's going to carry on over this semester is students will be doing more official assessments, and they're going to increase in complexity, and the teacher's going to have more that they can look at to give more accurate data for working levels later on at the end of the semester. And so for students, particularly in grades 9 and grades 11, who are starting their IGCSE or IB courses, they're having introductory topics at the moment. They're starting off with those topics. And so some of their working levels, some of their scores on official assessments are a little higher, and they need to work hard to make sure they maintain them as the course increases in the amount of work that they're learning, the amount of complexity that they're being faced with. So all teachers or teaching teams, if there's more than one teacher for a course, wrote a statement to explain how they use their professional judgment on the official assessments to determine working levels. Because one of our principles for assessment in the high school is that we want assessment to be transparent. We want you as parents to know how we're coming up with the performance indicators, the working levels for your children. We want your children to know how they are performing and how the data is being used. And if you want to view those statements, they're not printed on the report because each subject has its own statement and they vary in length, but they are available if you log into PowerSchool. There's a little symbol, a comment symbol, next to the working level for this reporting period, and it will explain how the teacher or teachers have come up with the level on the report card. And at the end of the semester, they'll be writing a new statement because they'll have more data that they're looking at when they do the final working level for this semester. So this is the part where we have a little bit of audience participation. I want you to imagine you're the teacher and you're looking at some student assessment data and you're going to come up with a working level for the student based on the statement. So this one is IGCSE English Year 2. This is the statement that's in there for all Year 2 English IGCSE courses. The working level for the mid-semester 1 report card was determined by the Of Learning Descriptive Writing Assessment. So this is a course where they've only done one official assessment so far. So have a little guess. Hold up with your fingers so I can see what do you think is under the green box. What level did this student get based on the data available? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I'm seeing lots of 4s. Yes. The students only had one assessment, they got a 4, the teacher's given them a working level of a 4. Let's look at another course. This one is IGCSE Math Higher Year 1, and this is the statement that the teachers have used. It was determined by the results of the unit tests only. As the second test covered content that required more application and synthesis, it has a greater emphasis on the working level for this report. So let's have a look at the data for 2 students. Student number 1 got a level 7 in the first test and then a level 6 in the second. And student number 2, the opposite way around. They got a 6 in the first one and a 7 in the second one. So let's play the game again. For the student number 1, what level do you think, working level do you think the teacher would assign to this student based on the data and the statement? So hold up your fingers, let's have a look, have a guess, or have a judgment. I can see 6s. Yes, because the second test had more emphasis than the first. Even though the student did a bit better in the first, the second one was the more important test in this reporting period. What about student number 2? What do you think the teacher would assign them? Okay, I'm seeing 7s, yes, and that's what the student got. So the teacher, using the working level determination statement, you as a parent, if you want more information on how your child's working levels have been determined, you can look at those statements. Let's go to a third example. This one is for IB Chemistry, higher level, Year 1, where 3 assessments have taken place so far. There's been a topic 1.1, 1.2 multiple choice, an extended response, and a reassessment on chemical equations. And if we read that statement, it says the extended response assessments have a greater weight in the overall working level than multiple choice assessments. So when we have more data, we have different ranges sometimes in numbers. And when I went through Dr. Brooks's grade book to have a look at some examples of the actual levels she was working with, these were some students' results. So let's have a think of student number 1. They got a 7, and a 6 on a reassessment of chemical equations. Now, I do want to say that chemical equations are a fundamental skill in chemistry, and that's why she'd given them an assessment that they didn't do so well on earlier on, and she gave them a reassessment to see if they could hone those skills. So what do you think that student number 1 was given as a working level at this point in the semester? Okay, calling out is fine. Yes, that student got a 6. Now, data that we can't see on the screen, but you can see if you go into a teacher's gradebook, is how the student scored on that level 7 or on the level 6 and how close they were to the next level up or down, which the teacher's also using that information with their working level. What about student number 2? This one, a bit more tricky. The student got a 6 and then a 2 and then a 1 on the reassessment. What do you think the working level might be for this student? Hold up your fingers, give it a little guess. What would you give from that? I'm saying 2s and 3s. This student got the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, Dr. Brooks, when she looked at this whole data, could see that this student needed to be given a 3 at this point, based on that data. So the purpose of reports at Seoul Foreign School are to communicate to you, the parents, the students, and outside organizations a student's achievement. And so we want our grades to be accurate, meaningful, consistent, and supportive of learning. We want students to be able to look at their working levels at this point in the semester and set targets for themselves. Do they want to maintain a level? Do they want to move up a level, looking at the data that they have in their courses? So are the new working levels fulfilling the purpose of reports at SFS? Are they giving students and parents that kind of data? So now I want to do a comparison of actual scores that our students at SFS have achieved in IGCSE and IB and compare it to the working levels that went out in the reports yesterday. So this is a distribution of the actual IGCSE scores that students achieved in May 2017. So you can see we have quite a number of 7s, and then we have a bell curve going up and over. Level 6, most of our scores came out as grade A, which we correlate to a level 6, and then it slopes down. We have very few down at the 2 and 1 level. So let's see how our students did in grades 9 and 10 in the current reporting period. So you can see we have a bigger number of 7s at this point. And that's made up partly because our grade 9 students are early in those courses. They've only done a few assessments and the skills are developing in complexity. But the bell curve is of a similar shape with similar peaks in those places. And so comparing the two together, blue are our current working levels, and because it's 2 grade levels added together, that's why the blue bars are double in size really compared to the IGCSE ones, and the red are our actual IGCSE scores. So the information, the assessments that our teachers are doing and the working levels that they are determining are matching the kind of performance we've seen from our students in the past. What about IB? This is a chart showing our IB scores from May 2017. So we have some level 7s, but then we go up for 6s, up again. Most of our grades are level 5, final levels that are awarded, and then 4s and 3s, and we didn't have really any 2s or 1s in May 2017. Now for IB, we also have data for the past 5 years. It's exactly the same shaped curve. Just let me go back one slide. And again, this is data on hundreds of children. You can see it's almost 1,200 level 5s over the 5 years that our students have been awarded, and the bell curve is the same kind of shape. So how does that compare to our students in grade 11 at the moment? These are our grade 11 working levels at this point in the course. So we do have a few more level 7s at this point. It's early in the IB course, and we hope that those students can maintain those levels, because now they know what IB level they're working at, and they can work to keep at that level. They don't have to do a translation from a percentage to IB in their courses. They're getting accurate information on where they're at the moment. And so a comparison of our students, which is blue, our grade 11s, to the actual IB final levels awarded in May 2017. It is a similar shape, but we have higher achievement at the moment. Let's hope our students can keep working at that level, and we're going to see our IB scores and our performance of our students increase. And that is one of the goals of reviewing the assessment at Seoul Foreign School. And so finally, I just put all the grade levels together. This shows that the different colors are the different grade levels, but the shape of the curve is quite similar for all of our grade levels. Level 7 going up to 6, down to 5 in that bell shape. So we do believe that the working levels are fulfilling the purpose of reports at SFS. That the grades are accurate, meaningful, consistent, and supportive of learning. And just a reminder that report card dates are the end of semester reports will come home to you on the 15th of January. The end of semester is just before Christmas, and we do our semester exams in the final few days of the semester. And then we have another mid-semester report in March, and final end-of-year reports come home on the 4th of June. I can hear pictures being taken. Just let me know when you're finished. Okay, and now I'll open it for questions. And so you can ask general questions, and if you have specific questions about your child and you want to ask those to me and Mr. Holcomb after the presentation, we're going to be here and we'll give time for that if you prefer to ask them in and not in a forum like this. But please let me know if you have any questions. And yes. The question, I need to repeat the question because we're videoing, but are the students aware that some assignments are counting more towards their working level than other assignments? Teachers should be sharing that information with the students that this is a more important assessment than another. For example, with the chemistry example that I had on the board, Dr. Brooks is telling the students it's the extended response that counts 60% in the final IB exams for the level that you get. And multiple choice only counts 20%. Yes. Okay. Yeah, so the question is, do the students know how many, and it's of learning assessments, official assessments that they have during the course? All of our teachers prepared last year what we call assessment maps, and they've been shared on Pagoda, and they've been shared with the students, and they show the general dates of which those official assessments are taking place. So it will say early September or mid-November. And then 10 days before the actual due date, teachers will be telling the students, you have 10 days now until the deadline or until the test. Because we want students to know what's coming. We want them to be able to prepare, ask questions, and present their best work for these official assessments, because they're the ones that teachers are considering for their working levels. So that's another way we've tried to make assessment transparent. So last year our teachers worked hard on making the assessment maps, and they can make modifications to those maps. We've asked them to contact Jeff and I if they want to make a modification, because we don't want so many changes that it becomes unmanageable for the students. So only a couple of teachers so far have made one change to their assessment maps during the year, because United in Prayer got changed and things had to get moved around a little bit. But we really are trying to give students plenty of notice and the information they need to do the best they can.
And those assessment maps that show every official assessment for the whole year went home to the students at the beginning, and they also were in the parent packets on the back to school night. So if you came in that evening, the handout that you received has those. So it shows every assessment that the students will take that impacts their working level for this whole year.
And in fact, many teachers have done their official assessments for the full 2 years because they're planning the course at that level of detail. They want the students to know how many official assessments are coming through the course. I saw a hand up over there. Teachers, the question was, if there's an outlier grade, can it be taken out by the teacher, and will the students know if it's taken out? Teachers can take out outlier grades. They have that freedom in their professional judgment, looking at the data. At the moment, there's not a lot of data because we're early in the year. And we've given teachers freedom to write individual working level statements because some students have had illness or other situations out of their control that have meant that they've not been able to maybe complete every official assessment during this reporting period. And so teachers are writing personal comments on how they've determined that child's working level at this point in time. So there is flexibility built into the system that everyone's not being judged in the same way. Teachers are allowed to use that discretion to totally remove an outlier or not have an assessment at all at the moment in a particular official assessment.
And at the beginning of the year when we had Ken O'Connor, a leading assessment expert, and one of the things he mentioned was that in order really to have validity, you need at least 3 assessments. So as Ruth mentioned, some of the courses have only had 1 assessment so far. That assessment may be an outlier. It's something you may want to look at. Ken was talking about how you need at least 3 because you might get a really good score, a really poor score, but by the time you get the 3rd one, you definitely have a sense of where the student is trending towards and which is most accurate. So this mid-semester report is early, and at our principal chat this morning, some parents were talking about the 2-year journey, and Ruth mentioned this. I know when I was teaching IB diploma, a student might score a 7 on their first unit test. Over the course of the 2 years, they're going to have to master more and more material that will actually become more and more complex. And so one of the things that you will find is maybe at the end of this first semester, where you find your students scoring, let's say at a 5, they will actually have to work harder and harder to keep that 5 over the course of the next year and a half, because they're going to have more and more material. They'll be assessed summatively on all of that material, and it will get more complex. So one of the things I do want us to understand is the first mid-semester report working level is based only on an 1/8 of the course for 9th and 11th graders. They have a long journey ahead of them, so it's early in the game. It's a good data point for where they are now. The semester report in December, those exams in the January report will give us even a better picture of where they are, but it really is a journey over the 2 years, and it does continue to gain in complexity. So, yeah. Yes, yep, yeah. Yeah, once teachers start adding assessments and data tomorrow, the mid-semester report goes away. That grade, or that working level, can change as new assessments come in.
Yes.
So are students evaluated or assessed on only tests or projects, or other factors considered classroom participation, homework, whatever else? Or is that up to the teacher's discretion in reviewing classes?
Okay, so the question was, are the students assessed on only tests and essays and projects, or are there other factors as well that factor into the teacher's assessment? At SFS in the high school, we use habits of scholarship as an assessment method for those classroom and out of classroom behaviors that we want to develop in students, and we want to acknowledge and assess in students, because we know that that plays an important role in their success on the tests, projects, and essays. And so on your report card, you'll see the habits of scholarship grade, which ranges from EE, which is exceeding expectations, down to NME, it's a 4-point scale, not meeting expectations. And that uses a different rubric. And all teachers in the high school are using the same rubric to assess students for their habits of scholarship, how they're applying themselves in class, meeting deadlines, coming prepared to class, and all the kinds of habits that we want to instill in the students. So they're getting feedback on that in a different way. But it doesn't add into their academic performance. A student can be terrible with deadlines because we can acknowledge they're working on their organizational skills, but if they're mastering the material, their working level isn't going to be impacted. They might have to stay after school and catch up with some work, but they're going to get the correct determination of their performance, which is something that over the past 2 years we've moved away from. We used to have all things added together, and you wouldn't know if it was just a student who was great in class and a great participant but not really doing so well on their assessments, or a student who was causing the teacher stress with missing deadlines but was acing the test, and their scores would be brought down. So we separated the system completely, and now academic performances are our working levels, and habits of scholarship are all the things that contribute to being a good student. Okay. Yes? Thank you. How are the predicted scores calculated? Well, at SFS, we've been doing the IB diploma program for a long time. We've been doing IGCSE for a number of years as well. And throughout that time, our teachers have been predicting students' performance. We have to send those scores off to universities and colleges. We have to send them off to the exam board. And we've never really asked our teachers to explain how they're predicting their grades. But what we do know, looking at the data, is that our teachers are very accurate in predicting their grades. And most grades are spot on what we expect, and the few that aren't are just plus or minus 1 grade up or down. What we're doing now, in the same way with working levels, teachers will write a statement on how they're predicting the grades. So they will tell the students, they will tell you what is being factored in, and it's going to be these official assessments. And the semester exams will be factored in more than a unit test or a descriptive essay as they go along, because the semester exams are testing big units of work, and they're also cumulative over the 2-year program. So the semester exam coming at Christmas for students in grade 12 is going to be for a year and a half's worth of work. So it's the closest at that time that we can get to an IB exam, and teachers can use that data to help them. So they'll be writing a statement to explain how they predict their grades. They always wrote that statement in their mind as they looked at the data. They always have a method of how they do it, but we've asked them to be transparent and be open with the communication so that everyone knows how the predicted grades are being formulated.
I'll restate your question. We'll do one, and then I'll get the second one. So you asked about a GPA number associated with the 1 through 7s. There actually is. It's on the back of the planner. So if you look at the student planner, right on the back of there, and we can republish that as well to the parents if you'd like to see that. Part of I didn't put it on there because what I thought was more important on the reporting, on the report card to parents, was that you understand what the 7, the 6, the 5, the 4, and the 3, and the 2, and the 1 mean, because they mean something for the IB diploma. So I thought that was more important than what it translates to in the GPA. And honestly, that's part of a conversation we want with students, is to know what you're achieving and what that level means. As we have in the past, the 1 through 7 scores at the end of the semester will calculate a GPA using those scores and the translation that's on the student planner. We handed it out last year, but I realized I don't think we've sent it out to parents again this year, so I can send that out.
And for those people watching the presentation after this evening, I'll make sure that the presentation, the link to the video and the link to the GPA conversion is on the e-news on the Monday. I can make sure it goes in for the Monday next week. Yeah.
As far as the conversion. So what we did last year was we kept the same scale that we've been using, so that there wasn't a change there, as far as the overall GPA scale. And we made the conversion that does favor the top end. One of the things that we often see as parents move to looking at assessment reporting in a 1 through 7 scale is people try to make a correlation to the A, B, C scale. So is a 7 an A, is a 6 a B, and they're really, yeah, and they're really not. What you do find is that, you know, for the IB, a 4 is meeting the expectations. And one of the things the IB scale does, this is for grade 11, is really it makes more refinement of the top end, finer gradations, more levels you can achieve up high that really pushes students. Before, we had quite a few students clumped at A or A+, and there actually wasn't enough distinction to help to separate out the really, really high achievement from the high achievement, from the good achievement, et cetera. So the 1 through 7 is meant to push the top end a bit more. So there really isn't a correlation to A, B, not directly in a way that's meaningful. So what we did was the GPA conversion does favor the top end. The gaps become bigger as you get down lower, just showing that the gap between a 7 and 6 is not the same gap as there is between a 3 and a 2.
So the question was, when teachers are looking at the assessment map and determining the working level, during semester 1, it's the first semester, but during semester 2, are they going to look at the data from semester 1? And yes, we would expect our teachers to be looking at the data from semester 1, because these aren't semester courses. They are 2-year programs. And so in the second year, when we move next year into grade 10 and grade 12 with the students who are starting these programs, we would be expecting teachers to look at the assessment data from previous semesters. Because another thing that all the teachers have been asked to do and are doing are common official assessments. So if a teacher is in a team, for example, IGCSE Math Standard, which has several classes with different teachers, they're using the same or similar levels, they check with each other, assessments, so that there's a fair assessment of students. It doesn't matter which teacher they have. And the semester exams will be the same for all students in the same course. So that data is going to build up over time, and teachers will be able to use it across the year and across the program. The question was, is there a minimum or maximum number of assessments for each class? When we were developing the assessment maps last year, and asking teachers to plan out the assessments that they were already doing. We just wanted them to put it on paper and give a rough date of when it was happening. The minimum number is 2 per semester, and that's for courses like art and design. We talked to that's a specialist course that is doing these huge projects that take a lot of time to plan, prepare, and finish. So the minimum number was 2. We didn't put a maximum number. We didn't tell the teachers there was a maximum number. What we did do is we collected all the assessment maps, we reviewed all the assessment maps, and we looked to see if it was a manageable amount, that there wasn't a test or an assignment or an official assessment every week or even every month, that there was some spacing out over each semester. And each course did that, and so we didn't put a maximum number on. The teachers, they're just doing a reasonable amount that seems to match the course that they're doing. Math have more, art have less, and most other courses are somewhere in the middle. Okay.
Good questions. We haven't stumped you yet. Yeah. The question was, is there a way to see writing comments from the teachers without harassing the students? Yeah, I may, if you've been in some meetings with me, I may have bored you with this before, but another thing that really stood out from Ken O'Connor's presentations at the beginning of this year was when he talked about the power of written feedback. Have you guys heard me talk about that before? No one's going to admit it? Oh, wow. Then you're going to have to sit through it again. There were several researchers that did a study, and they looked at cohorts of students in the same setting, and they gave the students the same material, and then they gave them different feedback, and then they looked and then gave them some more material and tested them again, and they wanted to see what were the learning gains between the two tests based on the type of feedback. So the first type of feedback they gave the students was just a number score. And who'd like to guess at what impact on learning that had by the time for the second test? Does anyone know? It had no impact on student achievement. Yeah, none. So then on the second assessment, they gave students written feedback and no number score. And the achievement went up. I forget the percentage exactly, but it was like 30%. Yeah. And then on the third group, they gave them a number score and a written comment. And who wants to guess how much it went up? 50? Yeah. Other guesses? It was actually 0. The students saw the number, and ignored all the words, and did not learn from that. That was a very powerful and I think compelling bit of research. And so one of the things that we've worked with teachers on is giving written feedback rather than a number. Because as soon as students see a number, that's all they care about is the number. And as we heard that, it did resonate because I've heard teachers say that over the years. I spent all this time writing comments, and the kids just flip to the last page, look at the number, and that's what they wanted to know. So we've worked with teachers because we know the easiest way to get feedback to you is often a number. And so teachers have said, maybe I will grade it and then put a number in later, so students take the time to digest the feedback. But we have heard from a lot of teachers as they're doing the as and the for assessments, which are to help the students learn, and they don't penalize their grade. So the great chances to practice. In the grade books, they're often recording just whether a student finished it, whether they gave them comments, whether the student handed it in on time, or they completed it or not. And that's most of the feedback that you can see in PowerSchool. It is harder to see that sort of handwritten feedback. That's more valuable for the students, and so they're getting that directly. It is difficult to know how best to get that to you, other than I think it is a good habit on the younger years to start asking them. So I guess my answer is partly bug them. But as they get older, what we do want is that we really want the students owning that in 11th and 12th grade, because we're really preparing them to head off to university where they do need to own all of that. So I give you that long answer to say we think the written feedback is so valuable that it is better to do that, even if it is a little harder for you, to require that of them. A good thing to look is you will often see on PowerSchool the comment that the student has been given feedback, then you can ask for it. I see that in science class, the teacher did give you some feedback. Did you bring that home? I would love to see that feedback.
And I want to add, just before we take your question, that one of the fears that I know some parents had and some teachers had, and we had, was that students were not going to bother with trying on the as and for assessments, because we were coming out of a system where everything counted and the stress, everything had to be done by the deadline, otherwise you lost points, and it was all averaging into your final grade. And we moved to a system now where those things don't count in the same way as they did before. And we haven't seen large numbers of students slacking off on those as and for assessments. In fact, students are more willing to give them a go, take a risk, maybe not do it perfectly so that they can get the feedback in order to learn and do as best they can on the official assessments. So the question was, do students have access to exemplar work so that they know what a level 7 or 6 looks like if they maybe got a level 5, so that they can work towards that? And part of our assessment policy and practices document asks teachers to start developing samples of work that they can share with the students via Pagoda or in class, so that students know, what does a level 7 piece of work look like? Because sometimes level 7 work is much shorter than level 5 work, because what's been done in the work is of a higher quality. And when students see those kinds of examples, I agree, they realize I don't have to spend the time, I just need to make sure the quality is the right one. So teachers have been asked to develop banks of sample work, and that is something that we're working on with the implementation of the new policy now.
And I have heard anecdotally many teachers for the as and for assessments actually have students assessing work. So students get the rubric or the mark scheme, and teachers are showing a sample piece of work, often from Cambridge or from the IB, and then having students mark it, because teachers know that that's the best way for the student to understand their own grade, is to grade someone else's. And I've heard many teachers talking about this, and I've seen it in the grade books as an as and for assessment. I think it's a for assessment. I've mostly seen it as. Math doing this, lots of social studies classes doing this, English classes doing this, because it is good. And students the first time will often either grade very high or very hard, and then they will see, oh, that's actually this. Oh, okay, and it really helps to anchor their understanding of what it looks like. Because absolutely, and I've heard lots of teachers and students talking about this, the best way to learn what a good paper is to see one. And very good questions. Any other remaining questions? We don't want to keep you here longer, but we want to make it worth your trip out, because we really do appreciate you coming. One other question that I have heard from parents, just to see if this is one, I have heard some parents ask about the differences in levels, because we've moved from a system that had 99 levels of performance to one that has essentially 7. And I have had parents ask me, my student got the top 6, just a few marks away from a 7, and someone else got the lowest 6. And both of them have a 6 written in on their grade. How does that work? And I would encourage you that if you do look in the Power School, in the individual Power School grade books, you'll be able to see for every official assessment the raw score as well as the converted score. So every subject has a different conversion from a raw score to the 1 through 7 score. And on Pagoda is usually the correlation chart, the chart that teachers are using. So you can ask your student, was that a mid-5? Is that a high 5? Is that a low 5? And I think so important for our students and their stress levels, because we hear a lot about that from students, is knowing really accurately where you're at so you can know what you're aiming for. If you're at a low 5, as you get more and more content and it gets more complex, you're going to have to work very hard to get to the top of the 5-mark band and into a 6. But you know it's ahead of you. If you're right at the edge of a 6, you know that you don't have far to go. And while the content may get more complex and there's going to be a lot more of it, you're almost there. You're right close to that edge. And I think you saw a little bit as we looked at samples of 3 different grades in the grade book. Patterns begin to emerge. And as we get to the end of this semester, when you have 5, 6, 7, 8 official assessments in there, plus a semester exam that's cumulative, you think you begin to see very clearly in most cases what a student is consistently performing at. And those working level statements help you to know, is each test just a unit test, so they're all the same difficulty? And you can look for maybe different subject content they got or didn't get as well. Or is it building cumulatively? And so everyone is a little more accurate picture of how they might perform at the end, because I know often in the math classes, every test incorporates everything from the test before and the new content. It builds, builds, builds. So the latest test is always the best picture. But what I hope through all this is that, again, as Ruth mentioned with transparency, both you and your students, there shouldn't be any surprises coming into a semester report card. You should be able to see a trend that happens right through the semester and know about where the student is heading. The semester exam is obviously an important piece because it's cumulative over the whole semester, but it wouldn't be out of nowhere. You should see a really clear trend throughout the semester, and then their final arrival point at the semester grade. All right, I tried to buy you some more time to come up with any last questions by asking one. All right, well, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Ruth, for preparing the presentation. And if you do have any individual questions for us, we'd love to invite you to come and ask us specifically afterwards. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you.